There are moments in crypto when you feel something shift. Not because of a price pump, not because of hype, and not because of some loud influencer shouting predictions, but because of a quiet realization that hits you like a slow-motion scene in a movie. A moment where you suddenly understand that what you're holding, what you've been accumulating, what you've maybe even questioned at times, might be far more important than you ever allowed yourself to believe. And that's exactly what's happening right now with QNT. It's almost funny when you think about it. We're in a market filled with noise. Meme coins launching every 5 minutes, influencers screaming about the next 100x, people chasing pumps, hopping from chart to chart like they're trying to catch lightning in a bottle. But here you are, holding something different, something quieter, something that doesn't beg for attention, something that doesn't rely on hype because it doesn't need hype, something that might genuinely change the architecture of the entire digital world. And if you're holding just one QNT, I want you to take a breath and understand this. It may be more important than you think. Because while most people are chasing trends, QNT is building something foundational. Not flashy, not noisy, foundational. The kind of thing that doesn't just pump during bull markets but becomes infrastructure, the backbone of systems that governments, banks, enterprises, and global institutions rely on. QNT isn't trying to be the next trendy token or viral coin. It's positioning itself as the glue, the bridge, the translator, the connective tissue for a world that's about to go fully digital. And if you're paying attention, you can feel it. There's something different about this project. Something that makes people whisper instead of shout. Something that makes early believers hold quietly while everyone else sleeps on it. Because QNT is not a gamble, it's a thesis. A thesis about interoperability. A thesis about regulated digital assets. A thesis about the future architecture of the global economy. A thesis that the world is moving toward tokenization, automation, and borderless systems, and someone needs to build the rails. And that's why this moment matters. You might not realize it yet, but holding even one QNT is like owning a tiny piece of the future financial internet. Think about that. One single token in a supply that is permanently limited, fixed forever, with no inflation, no new supply, no games. In a world moving toward tokenized assets, CBDCs, and seamless digital connectivity, owning something like that is not just an investment. It's positioning. It's like standing in the early days of the internet and owning a piece of the protocol layer that everything else will eventually run on. But here's the part people underestimate. QNT doesn't need hype because institutions are already watching it. Governments are already exploring it. Banks already understand it. Developers already realize why it's different. And while retail is busy panicking over small price swings, the people who see the bigger picture, the ones who understand infrastructure, are quietly stacking. And maybe you're one of them. Maybe you got in early. Maybe you picked up one token and thought, is this even worth it? But deep down, something kept you there. Something made you hold. Something made you resist the urge to chase the next shiny coin. Something made you trust that this project wasn't like the others. And you were right. Because when you zoom out, when you silence the noise, when you ignore the drama and look at the world objectively, you realize that QNT isn't just another crypto. It's a key to interoperability, a key to connecting networks that were never meant to speak the same language, a key to bridging blockchain with real-world systems, a key to unlocking the full potential of tokenized finance. And that's why holding even one QNT could matter more than you think. Because the future is not going to be dominated by 1,000 different blockchains fighting for attention. The future will be built on systems that need to communicate, synchronize, and operate together, and QNT is positioning itself as the translator of that new world. So if you're holding a single token, even just one, understand this: you're not late, you're not small, you're not insignificant. You're early, you're positioned, and you're holding a piece of something that could become fundamental to the next evolution of the digital economy. And when the world finally wakes up to what QNT actually is, not the price, not the chart, not the hype, but the role it plays, the importance of owning even one token will become crystal clear. This is one of those rare moments where the quiet investors, the patient ones, the ones who see beyond the noise, are preparing for something much bigger than the market currently realizes. When you really break down what makes QNT different, what makes it feel like this quiet giant that nobody sees coming, it all comes back to one thing: The world is changing faster than most people understand. And the changes happening behind the scenes in governments, in banking infrastructure, in enterprise systems, are setting up a future where interoperability isn't just useful, it's mandatory. And QNT isn't guessing that future. QNT is already building inside it. Let's be brutally honest. Most cryptos exist in their own bubble, their own chain, their own isolated ecosystem where everything works beautifully until you try to connect it to the real world. It's like building a mansion on an island with no bridges. Looks amazing, but no one can reach it. No enterprises can plug into it. No governments can integrate it. No legacy systems can adopt it. Most crypto projects don't fail because they're bad. They fail because they're disconnected. QNT saw that problem from day one. And instead of building another island, they started building the bridges. This is why when people say, but QNT doesn't have the hype, or why isn't QNT trending? They're missing the entire point. Infrastructure isn't loud. Bridges don't trend. The backbone of an economy isn't built for clout. It's built for stability. It's built for permanence. It's built so that everyone else can build on top of it. That's what Overledger is, a digital superbridge. Something that doesn't care what blockchain you use, what network you prefer, what standard your government picks, or what system your bank relies on. Connects everything. Legacy systems, private blockchains, public chains, central bank networks, enterprise APIs, all of it. Seamlessly, silently, without forcing anyone to change what they already use. And that right there is the genius. QNT doesn't force the world to adopt blockchain. It adapts blockchain to the world. But here's where things get even deeper, and even more important for anyone holding just one QNT. Look at what's happening globally. Tokenization of assets is accelerating faster than people realize. We're talking real estate, bonds, money market funds, securities, identity systems, supply chains, invoices, national currencies. Everything is moving onto networks. JP Morgan is tokenizing. The Bank of England is tokenizing. The EU is rolling out digital identity frameworks. The US has pilots running behind the scenes. The UAE, Singapore, and Japan are already doing cross-border digital settlement trials. The BIS openly admitted that tokenized systems will run the future financial infrastructure. And do you know what all of these systems have in common? They're not going to use just one blockchain. Some will use Hyperledger. Some will use private Ethereum frameworks. Some will use public chains like XLM, XRP, and HBAR. Some will remain on permission networks built decades ago. The world is not unifying into one chain, it's fragmenting into many. And when you have a fractured digital landscape, something has to tie it all together. Something has to connect those systems. Something has to let banks talk to blockchains and blockchains talk to governments and governments talk to global settlement networks. That something is interoperability. And interoperability is exactly what gives QNT its quiet, unfakeable power. Now let's talk supply, because this is where things get almost uncomfortable in the best possible way. QNT has one of the hardest, strictest, most unchangeable supply caps in the entire crypto industry. No inflation, no minting, no increasing supply, no dilution, ever. That means every QNT you hold is a fixed piece of a network that is designed to scale globally. Think about that. Most cryptos inflate over time. Most increase supply to reward validators or pay incentives. Most dilute. QNT does not. QNT cannot. And when something cannot be diluted, its future value isn't about hype. It's about usage. Imagine the world actually reaches the point where banks, governments, fintechs, and enterprises are all running systems through some form of interoperable layer. Imagine thousands of institutions using QNT licenses. Imagine Overledger gateways operating worldwide. Imagine real-world assets being tokenized at scale, not in theory, but in practice. Now imagine the value of a token with a tiny supply and massive utility demand. Suddenly, holding one QNT doesn't feel symbolic. It feels strategic. But most retail investors miss this. They scroll past QNT because the chart isn't mooning every 2 weeks. They prefer the coins that shout. QNT whispers. But the world is shaped more by quiet, unstoppable infrastructure than by loud speculation. And if you're holding QNT, you're aligned with infrastructure, not noise. And here's the part that gets people emotional when it finally clicks. You don't need 50. You don't need 100. You don't need a bag so heavy you can't sleep. Even one QNT gives you exposure to a future that is not built on hype cycles, but on global transformation. Holding one token in a fixed supply ecosystem tied to real utility, tied to government-grade systems, tied to enterprise frameworks, tied to the digital future of finance, that is not small. That is not irrelevant. That is not a joke. It's positioning. And positioning is the difference between people who react to the market and people who get ahead of it. You might not realize it, but if you've been holding even a single QNT, you've been positioning yourself in a way that the majority of the market won't understand until it's too late. Because while everyone else is distracted by noise, you're sitting on something that could become foundational. And foundations don't explode overnight. They grow quietly, then suddenly. That's the moment we're approaching. The moment where the world wakes up. The moment where interoperability isn't niche anymore, it's required. The moment where systems need overledger, and the supply of QNT does not change. And if you're holding even one, you're part of that next chapter in a way that most people won't understand until the door has already closed. There's something people completely miss when they look at Quant. They stare at the price, they stare at the chart, they stare at the market cap. But they never stop to ask the real question. Why does owning even one QNT matter? And honestly, that question flips everything. Because when you zoom out, when you really look beneath the noise, you start to realize that QNT isn't trying to be another coin. It's not trying to be a faster Bitcoin. It's not trying to be a cheaper Ethereum. It's not trying to be a better Solana. Quant is becoming infrastructure. Infrastructure for money. Infrastructure for banks. Infrastructure for digital assets. Infrastructure for governments. And here's the crazy twist. You don't need 50 QNT. You don't need 20. You don't even need 5. For some people, even one QNT might put them in a better position than 99% of retail investors who are chasing hype coins that will disappear in 2 years. Let me explain why. Think of the future we're walking into, a world where everything is tokenized. Stocks, bonds, real estate, currencies, carbon credits, land titles, supply chain routes, medical records. Everything becomes programmable, transferable, auditable, automated. This isn't sci-fi. This is the direction the BIS, IMF, ECB, Fed, and every other major central bank is moving toward. Now imagine all those systems, built across different networks, different countries, different regulations, different frameworks, are completely incompatible. One bank uses Hyperledger. Another uses Corda. Another uses Quorum. Another is building their own blockchain. And then you have dozens of private blockchains that aren't even visible to the public. It's a mess. That's the reality institutions are dealing with right now. Money is modernizing faster than the rails can keep up. And that's where Quant steps in. Not as a blockchain. Not as a competitor. Not as another layer. But as the connector. The translation layer. The operating system that solves the exact problem no one else has been able to solve at scale. Interoperability. Not multi-chain. Not bridge this token here and there. Real interoperability, where legacy systems and blockchains can talk to each other natively without needing a middleman, without needing trust, without needing a custodian. And here's the part people overlook. To access this system, to run these connections, to deploy enterprise-grade smart contracts, to move assets between networks, institutions need QNT tokens. They need them to access the Overledger platform. They need them to deploy applications. They need them as the licensing mechanism that connects their system to every other system. This is why QNT's supply matters. This is why scarcity matters. This is why even one token matters. Because QNT isn't inflationary. It's not minting new supply. It's not feeding validators. It's not printing new coins like some ecosystems do. It's fixed. Forever. And the kicker? Most of the supply is already locked in cold storage, held by long-term investors, enterprises, or stored in Quant's own treasury for institutional partnerships. That leaves retail with a tiny amount of circulating supply to compete over. And here's where it gets crazy. We're not talking about retail fighting retail. We're talking about retail competing with banks, with governments, with corporations, with entire financial systems that are eventually going to need QNT to operate in a tokenized world. You see how everything shifts? Suddenly, owning one QNT stops sounding like a weak position. It sounds like early access. It sounds like front row seating. It sounds like being one of the few people holding the asset that the future system will rely on in ways most people don't even realize yet. Because if tokenization reaches even half the scale the IMF is projecting, if central banks actually integrate digital assets into their cross-border systems, if private blockchains become the backbone of global commerce, then QNT becomes the invisible engine behind it. Not loud, not flashy, not trending on Twitter every week, but essential. And that's the type of asset that sneaks up on the market quietly, then one day explodes not because of hype, but because the world suddenly needs what it offers. That's why holding even one QNT might end up mattering more than people think. Not because of price predictions, not because of charts, but because of utility, scarcity, and inevitable demand from entities far bigger than any retail trader. Let me leave you with something real, something most people never slow down long enough to feel. There's this moment in every major technological shift where regular people have a window, a tiny window, to position themselves before the world realizes what's coming. Most people miss it, not because they're dumb, not because they're lazy, but because they're distracted by the noise, scared by the volatility, shaken by every dip, every correction, every headline designed to confuse and intimidate retail investors. But the people who do win, they're the ones who can zoom out and say, I know what this is becoming. I know where this technology is heading. And I know what role this asset will play when everything finally clicks. Quant is one of those once-in-a-generation assets where the use case is bigger than the hype, bigger than the market cycles, bigger than the short-term fear. If the world is moving into a fully interoperable, tokenized financial system, and we both know it is, then QNT won't be optional. It becomes the connective tissue of the modern economy, the standard, the rails, the operating layer. And that's why holding just one QNT isn't a joke. It's a position. Think of everything happening right now. Banks are running pilots. Governments are testing infrastructure. Enterprises are tokenizing assets behind closed doors. CBDC frameworks are being connected, aligned, and standardized. Institutions are preparing for a world that moves financial value with the same speed and flexibility as sending a text message. All of that eventually needs an interoperability layer. And the one that actually works, the one that's compliant, scalable, audited, enterprise-ready is Quant. So if you've been doubting yourself, if you've been wondering whether your position matters, if you've been feeling like your single QNT doesn't count, stop. You're earlier than you think. You're seeing something most people won't understand until it's already too late. You're not holding a meme coin. You're not gambling on hype. You're holding a piece of the infrastructure the future financial system is likely to run on. And that puts you in a different category entirely. Before we wrap, let me talk to you directly. If this video gave you clarity, if it opened your eyes, or if it confirmed what your intuition has been telling you, don't keep that feeling to yourself. Hit that like button so more people who are lost in the daily market noise can finally see what's actually happening behind the scenes. Drop a comment and tell me how many QNT you're holding, even if it's just one. Especially if it's just one. Because you're gonna look back one day and realize that was one of the smartest moves you ever made. And if you're not subscribed yet, listen, don't wait. This channel is where we decode the stuff nobody else wants to talk about, the real adoption, the real infrastructure, the real reason assets like QNT, HBAR, XDC, XRP, and XLM are gonna shape the next era of finance. So subscribe, join the community, and stay locked in. Because trust me, you're going to want to be here for what's coming next.